British Empire. South Africa, 1879. Isandlwana fell before lunch. By sunset, 150 men had to decide what to do about the several thousand warriors walking toward them. Nobody was coming to help. To understand the defense of Rorke's Drift, 1879, you have to start with the world that produced it. The Anglo Zulu War had already produced one of the British Empire's most shocking defeats at Isandlwana. That same disaster transformed Rorke's Drift from a rear position into an exposed target. The defenders were few, the perimeter improvised, and the incoming force far larger. The battle therefore began under the shadow of imperial confidence already broken elsewhere that day. That background matters because stories like this are often flattened into a single heroic beat. In reality, the Central people were operating inside a system that had its own logic, routines, strengths, and blind spots. Rorke's Drift mattered on more than a tactical scale. Another collapse immediately after Isandlwana would have deepened the sense of imperial vulnerability dramatically. A successful defense, on the other hand, could restore morale and reshape the narrative around the opening of the war. That does not erase the wider injustice of the conflict, but it does explain why the stand became so heavily mythologized in British memory. This was not a clean contest between genius and stupidity. It was a contest between one side that believed its structure made it safe and another side that had learned, through pressure and necessity, that big structures almost always leave predictable seams. That is why the opening conditions are so important. Long before the key move was made, the future had already been shaped by habit. Guards trusted timetables. Intelligence officers trusted assumptions. Military planners trusted doctrine. Occupation authorities trusted fear. Ship captains trusted the chain of command. Radar crews trusted what their instruments and superiors had taught them to expect. Every one of those habits made sense in normal conditions. But history is often decided in the moment when normal conditions stop being normal and the institution realizes too late that it has been defending the obvious target while the real danger was developing off to the side. And that is exactly where this story begins. Not with a miracle, but with a system that believed it was more secure, more informed, or more in control than it really was. The people at the center of this story were not improvising from nothing. The defenders included British regulars, colonial troops, engineers, medical personnel, and a handful of others under officers John Chard and Gonville Bromhead. Their survival depended less on grand maneuver than on discipline under close assault and the speed with which they reduced a sprawling station into defensible inner lines. Their plan grew out of observation, the slow, patient kind that notices who checks what, who signs what, who gets complacent, what time the vehicles move, which road is always used, which official story sounds ordinary enough to pass without inspection, and which lie is so simple that authority accepts it almost automatically. There was no elaborate pre-planned masterpiece here. The plan was fast adaptation. Shorten the perimeter, loophole buildings, build barricades from what existed on hand, create fallback positions, and keep ammunition moving under pressure. In other words, the defense worked because people on site understood that the first layout would not hold and prepared for the next one before the first one failed. The most important thing to notice is that the plan was never only about courage. It was about timing, psychology, and administrative rhythm. In war and espionage, people often imagine the decisive move is the loud one, the ambush, the blast, the theft, the sprint to the border. But those moments only matter because of all the quieter decisions that come first. Documents are forged. Cover identities are rehearsed. Routes are memorized. Escape windows are calculated. False assumptions are planted. Human ego is studied. And when the plan depends on surviving contact with a much larger force, the planners do not just ask, "Can this work?" They ask, "What will the other side assume when they see the first strange thing happen?" That question matters because most successful covert actions do not begin by convincing the enemy of a brilliant lie. They begin by nudging the enemy into choosing the wrong interpretation all by itself. Then came the moment when theory had to survive contact with reality. When the Zulu attacks came, they came repeatedly and from multiple directions. Fire discipline, cover, and the geometry of the barricades gave the defenders a fighting chance, but only just. The hospital became a desperate close-quarter struggle. Buildings burned. Sections of the outer line became untenable. Men withdrew inward and kept firing. The story is famous not because the defense was easy, but because the position kept shrinking and still did not collapse. This is where the human side of the story becomes impossible to ignore. Plans on paper do not sweat. Real people do. Somebody hesitates. Somebody misreads distance. Somebody loses track of time. Somebody notices something that should not be there. Somebody almost says the one sentence that would collapse the cover story. That is why operations like this are never as smooth as later retellings make them sound. The participants are always improvising around friction. They are adjusting on the move, deciding how much risk to absorb and how much to disguise. And once the first irreversible step happens, everything starts compressing. The clock gets louder. Every ordinary sound becomes suspicious. Every delay feels fatal. The turning point was the successful contraction of the defense. Once the hospital could no longer be held, the garrison's ability to fall back to a tighter interior position prevented the battle from turning into a rout. That kind of controlled retreat under immediate attack is one of the hardest things small units ever have to do well. In many cases, this is the true hinge of the whole story. Not the original plan, but the instant when the plan begins to break and the people involved have to choose whether to abort, adapt, or push forward anyway. That is also why these moments are so gripping in retrospect. The people living through them do not know they are in a legendary story. They only know the next 30 seconds may expose everything. The reason this story deserves to be told carefully is that it was never inevitable. It nearly failed for obvious reasons. Overwhelming numbers, fire, exhaustion, wounded men, a position not designed for siege, and the psychological aftermath of hearing that a British force had just been destroyed nearby. If discipline cracked for even a short stretch, the line might have folded. This is the part popular retellings often mishandle. They focus on the successful ending and quietly erase how close the whole thing came to disaster. But near failure is the point. It shows you the real structure of the event. It shows that victory was not produced by perfect control. It was produced by surviving chaos without losing the objective. That difference matters. A perfect plan teaches almost nothing because real wars are not fought in perfect conditions. A flawed plan that somehow still reaches the objective teaches you far more about decision-making under pressure. It also reveals something uncomfortable about military and intelligence institutions. Even strong systems can react badly when an event falls outside their expected pattern. Units can receive contradictory orders. Field commanders can misread intent. Search efforts can waste time on the wrong theory. Senior officials can double down on the assumption that the strange thing they are seeing cannot possibly be what it looks like. In story after story, that hesitation becomes oxygen for the people on the run or on the attack. And that is the deeper lesson here. The operation did not get through because the defenders were foolish. It got through because large organizations often need time to believe they are truly in danger, and a well-timed operation can live inside that delay. Once the main action ended, the story did not become simpler. The garrison held, and the battle became iconic in Victorian Britain, producing a famous cluster of Victoria Crosses and a long afterlife in art and film. Yet the memory of Rorke's drift has often overshadowed the wider strategic and political realities of the war, including the scale and significance of Zulu resistance. Aftermath is where myth usually takes over. The event gets compressed into a slogan, a great escape, a perfect sabotage, a brilliant deception, a humiliating theft, a heroic stand, a catastrophic intelligence failure. But history is almost never generous enough to leave a story in that clean condition. There are reprisals, investigations, political fights, reputation wars, propaganda uses, and arguments over what the operation really achieved. Some participants become famous. Others are erased. Some are decorated. Others are executed, imprisoned, or quietly blamed. Sometimes the tactical action succeeds while the strategic cost remains terrible. Sometimes the immediate damage looks small, but the psychological effect is enormous. Sometimes the operation becomes more powerful in memory than it was on the map, and sometimes the opposite is true. That is why the aftermath matters as much as the action itself. It tells you whether the event merely shocked an audience or actually changed behavior. Did commands get rewritten? Did security procedures tighten? Did a regime lose prestige? Did Allied planners gain time? Did a population recover hope? Did a war machine lose confidence? Did a country finally accept that its own assumptions had become liabilities? Those are the questions that turn a gripping episode into a consequential one. The most common mistake is to remember only the legend and forget the mechanism. The myth casts the battle as proof of inevitable imperial superiority. That is lazy history. The defense succeeded because of a very specific combination of fortification, fire discipline, leadership, and Zulu attacks that, though ferocious, arrived in ways the defenders could repeatedly punish. It was an exceptional event, not a blanket verdict on the war. That misunderstanding matters because it usually pushes audiences toward the wrong lesson. If you tell yourself this happened because one side had fearless heroes, you miss the administrative weakness, the doctrinal blind spot, the communications lag, the pattern of life observation, or the tactical patience that actually made the difference. If you tell yourself the other side was simply incompetent, you miss how difficult these environments really were and how narrow the margin often was between success and annihilation. This story still matters because it shows how small unit survival can depend on adaptation under collapse. Rorke's drift was not won by grand strategy in the moment. It was won by men who kept rebuilding the defense inside the battle while the battle was still trying to erase them. That is why the defense of Rorke's drift, 1879, still deserves attention today. Not because it gives us a nostalgic hero tale, and not because it offers a neat moral where the brave automatically defeat the strong. It matters because it reminds us that in war, control is often a performance before it is a reality. The side that looks dominant may only be dominant inside the assumptions it already understands. Once those assumptions are exploited by deception, speed, patience, engineering, nerve, or surprise, the balance can change faster than anyone expected. And that is the real reason audiences keep coming back to stories like this. At the center of each one is the same unsettling question. If a system this big could be fooled, penetrated, stalled, escaped, or shocked once, what else could happen when the next imaginative opponent finds the next seam? That is the real legacy of this story. It is not just about bravery. It is about how structures fail, how pressure creates invention, and how a single operation can expose weaknesses that an empire, an army, or an intelligence service did not know it had. If you want more long-form military history and covert operation breakdowns built around the real sequence, not the simplified legend, subscribe to the Orbit Table. And tell me in the comments which story you want next, because the deeper you look into operations like this one, the more you realize history is often decided not by the loudest force in the room, but by the side that understands the room a little better. This is the Orbit Table, and this was the story behind the battle nobody was supposed to survive, but one unit did.